What's up, guys? Welcome into Dog Central on a Thursday night. I am Graham Coffee. This evening, I am joined by a very special guest, noted UGA Twitter enemy, I think is appropriate, right?
Unreal.
Mr. Chris Marler. Mr. Chris Marler, a.k.a. Vern Funquist, a.k.a. Mr. Bama. How are you doing this evening?
I hate that intro a lot.
I'm just paying you back for the last intro you gave me on your show.
You also said, and this is my own fault, but you said one of the former Twitter accounts, not the current one, because I keep losing my accounts because of my, I guess, unprofessionalism is the best way to put it. But yeah,
I thought I said Vern Funquist CFB. My bad.
It's all good. It's all good. You know, honestly, we don't need a ton of people in the audience going to check that out. I think it's probably for the best on both sides. We just keep our distance at times. But no, I'm good, man. How have you been?
You what? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I said, I'm good, man. How have you been?
Oh, good. I'm doing well. It's raining like really hard here right now. So I'm blaming that for our slightly late start. Sorry for the weather delay, folks. It happens in baseball games. It also happens on podcasts occasionally. Yeah, man, I'm doing well. I got some ribs on the smoker right now, going up to see Widespread Panic at Red Rocks this weekend. So, you know, living my best life. Yeah. You might have heard of them. It is not a riot. It is a band. But tonight, we're going to talk about some early lines, SEC games of the year, best bets. Obviously, since I cover Georgia and you cover Alabama, or I would consider you an Alabama expert and an SEC expert at large, honestly, you do a really good job of covering the whole conference. But we're going to probably have a little bit of focus and skew towards those two programs. But before we get into that, I am curious, like this is, the first summer of no Saban since 17 years ago, I think. Yeah, that's right. Since 2007. So what are the vibes like around the Alabama program, around the Alabama fan base? It seems like there's a lot of positivity from the outside looking in, but what's your read on things?
So I have a lot of takes on this, and I think one of the things I try to do, and I'm sure I don't always do a great job of it, but I try to do is be as objective as possible, even when talking about Bama. And I think currently, if you ask anybody, the vibes are high right now. Like people are excited. Enough time has passed since Saban retired, so you've kind of accepted. I feel like they think, and here's what I compare it to, Graham. And like you know me outside of Twitter and in real life, and like I think you'll get this. Bama's in this like kind of false sense of security and confidence right now, because there's no games being played. They have weathered the storm. They lost 39 players. They got gutted from the portal. Obviously dealing with the Saban loss. 39 players, like the fourth most in the country. And like just the way you've recruited year after year, whoever you bring in is not going to be an even trade, like just from a talent standpoint. And sure, not every single player was going to be like a contributor or whatever, but so you weather all that, you get through spring ball. Spring ball looks pretty fun. It's completely different, but I think you're used to it right now. But like you're used to it in terms of like if you've gone through a breakup and then you kind of like get back out there too soon. And you're like, this is great. I'm so happy. And then like in September, like shit's going to get real and they're going to have to go play actual football games. And that schedule is brutal. And like, they could have a really good first year under Kalen DeBoer, and that could still look like 9-3 with how difficult that schedule is. And I think, I'm hoping that DeBoer does great. I'm excited for him. Do like what any normal fan base should do and try to support him, not do what Auburn did and try to make him a fake. What do you call it? Affair or whatever.
Well, not just an affair, but like an affair with a staffer. So, there are like a lot of implications there. Yeah.
I just think that like, right. You're going to have to show me this is like, unless this whole fan base has just grown up and turned the corner and become like the most measured and reasonable and logical, group of fans, that I've never seen before, which because no fan base is. I assume that's going to change a little bit during the actual season. But right now, yeah, like you've kind of been in this like lulled into this like false sense of, everything's great, and recruiting's gone well. He's done a really good job. I think he's done better than people like were giving him any sort of credit for when he first got there. But yeah, I'm like, what happens on the field is ultimately going to be like the test.
Yeah, he does not seem overwhelmed by just kind of the magnitude of the job and the amount of demands on his time. And I
Yeah.
think that was a question that I had. Really, just I have that question for anybody that's coming into the SEC, but really anyone that's coming into just like one of these top kind of 3 or 4 jobs in the conference, where every day of the year, like if you're standing in line at Chick-fil-A, some guy with his kid is going to want to shake your hand and get your autograph and all that. And it can be a blessing when things are going well. It can also be a curse, the Tuesday after a loss. But you make an interesting point by saying kind of there hasn't been any losses yet. Nothing bad has really happened since January. So, I mean, but that's what the offseason's for, right? Like if there's not good vibes this time of year, then there's not probably going to be, right?
Yeah, I'm not trying to be like a dick about it to like the state of Alabama or Bama fans in general, but just historically speaking, it's not the healthiest of fan bases. No fan base is, but like again, I think that enough time has passed where you're like, oh yeah, we're good. We'll see what happens when they play. Because I tell you what, man, there's a couple of those games that I look at on that schedule, and we'll talk about them here shortly. There's 2 that I feel like are just guaranteed losses, and it's Georgia.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's start with. We'll throw some Alabama lines up there since we're already talking about Bama a little bit. And we are using early lines here from Circa Sports. They kind of tend to be the market maker for a lot of these early lines on Sundays. They're the first ones that put college football lines out usually. If you want to go check them out, I don't think they work in every state, but out here out west, it's really a nice advantage to be able to bet these early lines on Sundays sometimes and find an edge. So shout out to them. I'm trying to make this. There we go. There's some of these games of the year lines, but yeah, Chris, open at Wisconsin. Like, does that concern you at all? Alabama's an 8-point favorite currently. It does. Okay. Why?
So one, and hopefully this changes with the regime change, and it also they improved last year in a lot of ways when this happened. Bama's a team that struggled pretty noticeably on the road, like the past couple of seasons. I think they're lucky it's going to be an 11 a.m. kick, but like this is foreign territory, right? Like SEC teams don't go that far up north. It's early in the year where it's like, I think the thing that scares you for if you're Bama, and I said this last year when they played Texas, is you haven't taken a loss that early where like in the former playoff model, you can't afford to lose again. You can probably get 2 losses and still figure out a way to motivate yourselves that like you still have a shot, right?
Right.
But that Georgia game is you're staring that down at the end of the month. You have to win those other first 3 games and finish 3-1 at least in the first part of the month because of how tough the rest of the schedule is. I mean, just going to Wisconsin and having it be like the first road game under a new head coach with a lot of new faces and all. I mean, yeah, I think there's cause for concern. And here's the thing too: it's like I don't know what Wisconsin has. I know they've got I think Tanner Mordecai still somehow in his like 11th year. But also
I covered him at the 2022 New Mexico Bowl in Albuquerque, which was with SMU and BYU. Sorry, but just took me back. It was fun. It was a good experience.
He's like at least a statistically speaking like a pretty prolific passer. And the one thing I know about Wisconsin from the ignorance that I admittedly have towards like that roster and team, they're going to be well coached because Luke Fickell's the head coach. And I think that like there has to be some level of concern because you're going to play a Power 5 team on the road that early.
Yeah, and I think Wisconsin returns a decent amount of production, and anytime you do have a coach with a good track record, which Luke Fickell does, I think it's fair to have some concern. Like, not concern, but like it's year 2, and year 2 usually you see that bump. But
Yeah,
that is a team that really struggled to score points last year, man. I mean, coming down the stretch of the season, they scored 10 against Ohio State, 14 in a loss to Indiana, and a coach that got fired in Tom Allen. They scored 10 against Northwestern. They did they did manage to put up 24 against Nebraska in overtime, 28 against Minnesota, and then they did play LSU kind of decently in the bowl game, although I think they were a little more interested in being there than LSU was. That was a 35-31 game that LSU came away with. But yeah, okay. I mean, it has to make you feel a little bit better, though, that you're not going on the road like opening weekend. You get South Florida and Western Kentucky at home. I guess my questions for Bama, with DeBoer, there is a certain element of like, I think everyone kind of just saying like they'll just figure it out on offense, or Jalen Milroe is going to take this big leap. And I don't think that's totally unfair. I mean, like, I have my questions about it. I have my questions about who's going to catch the football for them this season.
Dude, I have questions about who's going to catch the football when the center snapped it, like all last season. So, like, yeah, I got it.
Well, they brought in the kid from Washington that was like really good, Brailsford, right? Isn't he the center now? Yeah, so that's good. He's a good player, but I guess like if you know, I do have another little graphic for you here. No, it's not bad. It's not bad. But it's I guess the question is just like, you know, who are you guys going to have? Let's talk about this secondary, because Josh sent this to me the other day, and aka Dog Stats, our friend, who you should go follow on Twitter if you're not. But
phenomenal follow. Yeah,
excellent follow. This is like, I mean, like he literally sent me this, and his question was, is this really all that Alabama has coming back in the secondary? And I was like, yeah, I think so.
They lost 12 players in that position group in the portal this, like, in the first, and I guess technically second too, but like the first 2 cycles, 12.
Yeah. And I guess the positive side of this is that I see a 5-star there and a 5-star, you know, like Xavier Brown, 5-star, Mbakwe, 5-star, Xavier Mincy, 5-star.
Damani Jackson, former
5-star who has not played up to this point in his career, really. I mean, but he just hasn't played that much at all. He's only played like less than 700 snaps in his career and only been targeted 31 times. So is there like any insight that you have there at all?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I still have a year and a half of eligibility left. So if I lose the last 30 pounds, like, I might have to be able to suit up. This is, I've been saying this repeatedly since the portal opened in January. And I think Bama fans just kind of either didn't want to address it because of the Saban retiring, or it was just like, oh, we're fine. We always lose a bunch of talent. We'll figure it out. We'll be fine. The amount of talent they lost and just the amount of bodies they lost in this specific position group, like, throw away the Caleb Downs, like, leadership and talent standpoint. Like, you lost two NFL draft picks that were, you know, projected first rounders, and I think they went in the top like 40 picks, something like that, at both cornerback spots. So you have Malachi Moore, and Keon Sabb provides some sort of veteran experience because, you know, coming over from Michigan, but like, dude,
but he was a backup there too, right? Yeah.
I didn't know that until right now, so that's even worse. So, but like, everybody here, like,
he's a good player. He's a really good player.
They are like, it's all, you've seen tons of 5-star corners and safeties at Bama and Georgia and under Saban and Smart, like, whatever, have success early. They usually tend to do that when they are not on an island by themselves, and when they look across the field, the other person at the other corner spot isn't also a true freshman. So I think Bama's front 7 should be really, really good. Dude, the secondary is there's a lot of cause for concern. There's a lot of cause for concern.
I did want to ask you about the front seven, honestly, just because you lose Lawson and
Lawson's
Dallas
back.
Turner, obviously. Oh, Lawson's back. All right.
Yeah.
My mistake. I'm sorry. Braswell. You lose Braswell and Dallas Turner, who Braswell 56 pressures, Turner 55 pressures. Lawson, is I'm going to say his name wrong. Justin
Jihad
Ibogbe. Is he back?
I think he is gone. I thought you were going to say Jihad Campbell.
Yeah, I'm not. I know how to say his name. I recognize that word. Tim Keenan, Campbell, and Lawson were 4th, 5th, 6th in pressures on that team last year. With 21, 19, and 12. But you look at Bama as a defense, 254 pressures and 49 sacks, which is really impressive. That's a lot of freaking sacks.
Are you sure that's right?
Yeah.
That's how many they gave up too. So,
that's interesting. No, I'm looking at it right now on I've got it pulled up, but Braswell and Turner and Ibogbe, they were 141 of those pressures and 31 of those 49 sacks. I'm assuming like you guys just have a bunch of 5-star dudes stashed that Saban recruited on the defensive line and they're going to step up. Is that kind of the plan there?
So you would hope so. I think that like the one area where you feel from like a depth standpoint, you don't feel as concerned on paper. I remember looking at this a couple years ago because going into last season, 247 Sports, they had only ranked like edge rushers as their own position for 3 years going into last year, right? So high school recruiting rankings, whatever, they only had 3 years of that at that specific position. In those 3 classes, there were 10 total 5-stars. Bama got 6 of them. I think Georgia got 2, A&M got 1, and there was another one that went somewhere else in the SEC. Like the SEC got 8 out of the 10. None of those guys have left. Like, you've lost Dallas Turner, and maybe Braswell might have been included in there. I can't remember. But you have Keon Keeley, a top 5 overall player in the country coming out of high school. You've got a lot of star power, at least from like where they came out of high school. Are they going to what's the best way? Like, are they going to develop one? And are they going to be able to be not only productive and serviceable, but like actually good? Because that's the concern. Like, if you could be a good defensive end, but like what you're replacing for the 2nd year in a row now is Will Anderson and Dallas Turner. And so you need to like make sure that the production drop off isn't like something crazy. But at that one position, you should be pretty well stocked.
Well, that improves the outlook in my mind considerably, just because I do think that secondary is going to be a weakness, right? Like that feels like, maybe it won't be a weakness, but it certainly feels like a massive question mark sitting here in June. Like, I don't feel like you can sit here right now and say like, Bama's secondary last year is really what, in my opinion, they were able to kind of ride after that Texas game. Like they got shit figured on the back end. They got, some really talented young players to like understand the system and kind of learn from the mistakes that were made in that game. And then
Bill said Saban coaching the secondary.
Yeah. And a guy named Travaris Robinson, who happens to be at Georgia now.
He's overrated, but yeah.
But yeah, point being, I think you go back to the SEC championship game, take the injuries out of it or whatever. Georgia put other guys out there. Like Dylan Bell could not get separation in that game the way that he had gotten separation against Tennessee a couple weeks earlier or against Georgia Tech the week before. Like that kind of broke everything down, in my opinion. And as much talk as there was, I think, about Georgia's offensive line after Amarius Mims went out, like to me, it was more like, well, Georgia couldn't really get guys open consistently on some of these like short to intermediate routes that Carson Beck had kind of lived off of a lot of the year. Yeah. So I think, let's talk a little bit about Georgia, Alabama. The spread in that game is obviously not crazy right now. I mean, Alabama is a 5-point dog at home. Yeah. And I mean, I think honestly, when it opened at Circa, it was a little bit. Yeah. I mean, it hasn't moved much, but like, that's my point, really. It's not like people are hammering that. I mean, like, I think 3 and under is generally considered kind of a coin flip game, right? So let's say that, Alabama beats Wisconsin, because I think they will. I'd be really shocked if they don't. You come into that game, like, I guess the question that I kind of have to ask is, like, how many just how much shit are Bama fans going to talk if Alabama manages to win that game over Georgia and Kirby Smart in year 1 of Kalen DeBoer?
Listen, I'll just be honest with you, and I will be insufferable. For not to everyone, but to a few of y'all for sure. And it's most of the people that I'll just have to unblock from Twitter and say a couple things out again. But no, I mean, like, I think that Georgia fans have somewhat cooled down from, like, not, I won't say an arrogant standpoint, but kind of like. And here's the thing, Graham, like, you and I have been talking about this specific matchup at some point in the season for this will be the 4th season we've done this, like talking about this, and every single time they've played, I have said, like, immediately, yeah, I think Georgia wins. I think Georgia wins by 2 touchdowns because they are a better coach, better roster. Like, they just have looked better all season. And for whatever reason, when you guys get to Atlanta, it just does not go well.
Correct.
I think that, like, if Bama wins that game, I don't know what they would have to do with DeBoer's offense. I don't know what they would have to do, like, to win that game, what that would look like. I will tell you this. I've always, like, abided by the fact that, like, if you have a chance to put your foot on someone's, am I allowed to cuss?
Yeah. Go ahead.
If you have a chance to put your foot on someone's fucking throat in a game, in a season, or whatever, you do that, and you don't let up. And that's something that Kirby struggled with, I think, early in his career, like, in Atlanta in 2018, some of the stuff in 2017. He doesn't have an issue with that anymore. Now, you might have, like, a one-off where you have a Heisman Trophy winner and 2 great receivers, like, kind of go off, and it's like, and not give up any sacks for the only game all season, or like whatever happened with all the injuries you guys had this last year in December. But more often than not, Kirby Smart is ruthless and knows exactly, like, how to not only beat somebody, but, like, take their will and take it early. You don't think that he is excited to fucking put his, like, foot down on that program after everything that's happened and use it as a stepping stone for the rest of the season? I hate to say, like, sound like a broken record, but, like, I kind of feel like it's not going to be close at all.
Well, I think if Georgia has a chance to make it not close, I certainly think they will do that, especially because, like, the thing that I always come back to this time of year, especially about Kirby Smart, is that Kirby Smart loves nothing more than he loves recruiting. And Nick Saban was like that in many ways as well. But it's like Kirby Smart gets pissed when he feels like you are, messing with his ability to get the players that he believes should be at Georgia. And I don't think Alabama is, like, number 1 on the shit list right now in terms of people that he's angry at on the recruiting trail. That would certainly be Lincoln Riley after some of the things that have gone on over the last 12 months. But I still think what Kalen DeBoer is doing from a recruiting standpoint is enough and has been impressive enough to earn Kirby Smart's respect and to, like, kind of draw in the attention. And what that means is that Georgia's going to, if they get a chance to, like, put their foot on them, like you're saying, and kind of slap them down, I think they will. And you said that earlier about Kirby kind of struggling and at certain times to sort of, like, just stop people out early in his career. Yeah. And it feels like, truthfully, oddly enough, I shouldn't say oddly enough, but, like, I don't know, man. Sometimes I feel like myself or us in the media, like, we're so engrossed in this stuff on a daily basis that we maybe don't always have the best like 30,000 foot take. But
Right.
I'll never forget after the 2021 SEC championship game, I was talking to my mom on the phone, and she was like, you know what? Like, I feel like he coaches differently against Nick Saban than he does anybody else. And I think there's a lot of truth to it. I think that. Yeah, he does. Yeah. I think there's like some sort of, I don't want to hurt my dad kind of shit that sort of like went on there for a lot of guys for a while. And I obviously think Georgia kind of got over that hump in Indianapolis, and they got that national title. But I do think the way that Georgia game planned for that SEC championship game last year was just not really designed to take advantage of the fact, like, you have the better quarterback, create more possessions, and hope that
that's an
sort
opinion.
of,
I don't
separates.
That's not what I saw. I think Milroe's definitely the better quarterback that day for sure. Jermaine Burton, who's just like a guy that everyone roots for. It was good to see him go out there, and, because like you just want to see nice guys succeed. Yeah. I mean, like, listen, we joke about it all the time. Like, I hate you guys had so many injuries. That's so tough. Can't imagine what that's like. But at the same time, it's like I keep going back to the fact it's like, dude, that Georgia team lost 2 games in 3 years, both on neutral fields, both to the same team and the greatest coach of all time. And like, if you just had that loss in the calendar year that was a month later, like, it wouldn't have mattered. Kirby would have sacked those guys and then like taken the 5 seed and then killed everyone.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, it is what it is, right? But I do think it's going to be very interesting to see Kirby come back into like a full Bryant-Denny stadium, because I know it's been a long time since he coached there, but like, look, there was a point in time, I remember it, where Alabama fans loved them some Kirby Smart, dude, because he had that energy, and he'd be out there chewing ass and screaming at people, and it just kind of like he just had that edge that Bama era had, where it was like, we're up and coming, and now we're at the top, and we're just going to smash everybody. I do think it'll be interesting to see him go back, because we kind of got robbed of that during the COVID year when Georgia played in Tuscaloosa in front of like 20,000 people. But I'm excited for that game. I really am. I think what's going to be interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So real quick, another layer to that I think is really interesting, that like it fascinates me watching it unfold throughout the season. But like, Kirby has done something at Georgia where, like Saban, I think, probably had the same thing at Alabama, or, in the early 2010s. And maybe there's a couple other programs like that play in lesser conferences that have the same. But it's very obvious to me that like when Kirby starts the season, he's like, all right, here's our entire playbook. Here's everything. Here's every wrinkle that we could have. But here's what I'm going to like let you see, because you never know when you're going to need this. And it's like, you are like just hoarding as much as possible, like for the benefit of like the whole, at the end of the year, right? Like you don't want to give anything away too early. He has been so vanilla. And I feel like even like the Oregon game, obviously is like, it was a big score, but like, I feel like the perfect game for Kirby Smart every weekend is a win. But oh man, you made a bunch of mistakes that you have like that's the main takeaway. Yeah. Like you only won by like 19 or something like that, and you didn't get to put the scrubs in early enough, and so like now you got something to work on. Like having some homework is like what he I feel like lives for. I wonder if he kind of like throws that to the side against Bama, because I do think in that moment, like, it's not even the fact that it's like revenge or because he lost to Bama or like Saban or whatever, but there is also a part of Kirby that he's like, he is an alpha. He's the best coach in the country. And I think he also would probably want to let Kalen DeBoer know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've written about this kind of throughout the last 2 years. I've referred to what you just described as the long con, right? Like,
yeah.
And some people kind of get like frustrated with the idea that a team could be using like SEC games as practice, but that is what has been happening. Like that, there's been times where I'm like, yeah, man, they're running the ball like into this like 8-9-man box that Kentucky has got stacked there, and like him and Mark Stoops are just like fucking, appeasing each other, and like, man, isn't this great that we're having this like real physical football game, and neither of us is going to throw the ball more than 14 times a day, and we're just going to go.
They were in the same play 3 plays in a row against Kent State 2 years ago. The same exact play 3 plays in a row.
And it was like, you know what, Stetson, you better execute this play because we're going to keep calling it. And I think that stuff does pay dividends down the road. But what is fascinating about this Georgia schedule is that Georgia is in a spot where you better figure out who your dudes are before you go to Alabama, and before you go to Austin, and before you go to Oxford, and even before you go to Lexington in week 3. I think like that is not to be trifled with or taken lightly either. So I'm very interested in what the implications of that are for like Carson Beck's stat line and some of these things, where I do think, especially with a 17-game season, like you best get on and beat people soundly when you can early and rest guys for the fourth quarter or for the second half if you can. Like I don't think that, I don't think it's going to look the same at all. Even if this schedule wasn't quite what it is, I still think with the extended playoff that it might sort of change the dynamic a little bit. But yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to see how Georgia approaches that game. I think on paper, what really fascinates me a little bit is just like, I do look at Georgia's, I know they lost Brock Bowers. I know they lost Ladd McConkey, and that's not, those guys are all really good players, right? But like, I do think they have a deeper receiving core this year than they've had at probably any point under Kirby. I'm not, I don't think they have a Brock Bowers, but like they've got 8 guys that they can put out there and that are going to go like make plays
and they will. Like, there's not a team I say this all the time. There's not a team in the country that does a better job of distributing the football to like so many different players than Georgia. Steve, get in here. By the way, one of my favorite comments that Steve's ever made. I posted that graphic that I made for that LSU commit today, and it was. Listen, I'm like, all humbleness aside, it's maybe the best graphic I've ever made. It looked really, really good, and I did it in Canva, which is like. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's like, I made it in Canva though, which is apparently for children. But that's my comfort zone. Okay. I like to eat sushi with a fork, not chopsticks. And as I posted it, Steve was in the comments. He goes, I could teach you so much. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about, Steve? I had no idea he was a graphic designer.
Adam Steve is a Photoshop expert, man. Sign up for that tutorial. Steve, let us know when you make that Substack/Patreon. I'll be there, bro. Straight up. I'm not kidding. He said the second one was good with the lion. There you go.
That first off, it was a tiger, and that's not the one that I made, dickhead. That's the one that Hayes Foster.
Oh, I thought you made both of them.
No, I just put them side by side. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. Like Georgia, I honestly, this may sound crazy, or maybe I'm just delusional about how good they can be at this point. I almost feel like a longer season. If there's a team that would be able to get up even more for every game, I feel like it's Georgia. Like having to like elevate your like focus and execution. Like there's just no one else that does that at that level.
Well, I think Kirby, he said it after Georgia's first game last year, and again, it ties into this sort of, the long con kind of thing that we were just talking about. Like somebody asked him some question after they played whoever they played, UT Martin, I think in the opener last season, about like, do you feel like your team right now is like, looks like a playoff team or whatever? And he was like, I don't know. And I don't really care. I don't think he actually said, I don't care, but like what he said was
he said, I don't care.
Yeah, he said the team that is going to be standing there at the end of the season is going to be the team that gets better every week between now and the end of the season. And so, yeah, I think you're right. And I think that Georgia will. What's interesting is that Georgia last year And honestly, for all, aside from maybe Missouri in 2022, Georgia hasn't played anybody in the regular season in a while that could really expose a problem that they had. And I think that if they go and play at Alabama or Texas, and even if they lose one of those games or something, like, still the value that will come out of getting the teaching tape from that experience with the coaches that I think they have on staff will be immense, and it will make them better when it comes time to play in the playoff. Now, if you have a fatal flaw, then history says you have a fatal flaw. And I think last year's Georgia's team, like, their fatal flaw was up front. Well, yes, we know that. Yeah. But I mean, we'll see. We will see. Like, last year's Georgia team really struggled at times to get pressure with 4. And I think that was the deciding factor maybe in some ways in that SEC title. But I think that they'll have a lot of guys who are a year older, and I'm really interested to see what Michael Williams does as like a true outside linebacker, stand-up pass rusher. And I'm also very interested to see what Jalen Walker does as somebody who, he led the team in pressures last year with 26 pressures and 5 sacks, and he only rushed the passer 124 times.
They should tell him to do that more, I think.
Yeah.
I feel like he should do that more often.
I think you're right. Yeah, he had the 7th most pass rush snaps on the team, and he had the most pressure. So if they can even that ratio out a little bit, I think they'll be in good shape. But let's talk a little bit about these lines. So you've got these Bama lines here.
Also, Steve, stick around because I got a deep dive that I did specifically for Georgia at 7:30 in the morning today. I'm fired up.
He does. What do you? All right, let's play this game. If there's one game on here that you have to bet against Bama in, which of these numbers are you taking? Like, if you had to say,
Georgia
I'm
taking Tennessee.
Tennessee,
I would
really?
take,
okay.
I would take Tennessee probably because it's on the road. I'm also very high on Tennessee this year. I just think that they are going to be, like, from a talent standpoint, what they have at receiver. It's the deepest that receiving core has been in 25 years. And Nico, it all depends on Nico and like the hype that, he's assumingly earned. But like, love the fact that he sat a year, learned the system. Obviously, it did wonders for Carson Beck. It did wonders for Aaron Rodgers, except for his political views. Like, all of that's great. I will also say, looking at like some of the numbers, like none of the Bama, like there's nothing. When you look at the Bama lines, it's like, oh yeah, that's a lock. We used to do this. Me and Danny Cannell used to do this on his show every July. Like, what is your lock of the year right now? And the first place my eyes would go to was Georgia, Florida, because it took a while for Vegas to get caught up on like what was actually happening in that rivalry.
Yeah.
I think from a Bama standpoint, like, why are they a 2-point favorite at Oklahoma?
Why wouldn't they be? I mean, I don't. Oklahoma's been okay, but they still haven't really figured it out defensively yet. Like, doesn't that game have shootout kind of written all over it? And
I hope not. I'm going to shoot out myself if they lose in that stadium.
Do you not feel like that's going to be how it is this year, though? Like, you're going to go from like the most joyless murder ball type shit ever for a decade and a half plus under Saban to like
it hasn't been joyless murder ball in quite some time. That whole joyless murder ball
last year was pretty back to the roots. It was like we're going to put Jalen. Yeah, we're going to have some boomer bust pass plays. Look, dude, I was looking at something the other day that kind of blew my mind on Jesus, why can't I remember his name right now? Jalen Milroe. And it was basically that he had a 52.2% completion percentage on deep throws of 20 plus yards, and he had a 52.3% completion percentage of 10 to 19 yard throws. Like, it's just interesting.
A lot of that was him just doing that on purpose to prove a point to Tommy Reese that he didn't want him to be the OC. That's what I was told. So, no, I do think that like first year as a starter, I will go to bat for Jalen Milroe more than anyone else in this country because I think that the nation, like as a whole, tuned into that Texas game. He had a very bad game. He made 2 horrible interceptions. And from that on, in like this day and age with like fans in general, the confirmation bias of just wanting to be right from people and be like, just, and like whatever fucking like one line buzzword you have, like, oh, he's mid. He's cheeks, he's ass. Like, you know what? It's game 2. It's fucking game 2. Maybe give it a second. I mean, Jalen Milroe was like that team is. We said the year before in 2021 with like Bryce Young, like that's a 7-5 team without him. What is that Bama team last year without him as a starter quarterback? You know, hopefully he'll improve at some of those things, but I also feel like that for whatever reason, people have just decided that kid is just not very good. I'm not trying to be a dick, but like, did you think he was pretty good like in Atlanta? Because they, at the end of that game, when it started to get a little bit tight, and like I was like, oh shit, this is gonna be how it all ends. Like they had a choice of like what to do with the ball, and I thought that Tommy Rees would have, you know, like gotten real tight and tried to run the football and run the clock out. They put the ball in his hands. They ran a play that they had not run all year, like with a new wrinkle, like out of some formation, and they told him to go win the game. Fucking
and I mean he got the final. He got that final first down with his legs, right? And that was, I think, emblematic in a way of like, you know, I wrote that down. It's on my screen right here. It said work in emblematic at some point in show. And I did. But I'll be honest with you, Chris, and I'll just say it. Look, man, I'm still really not sold on the Jalen Milroe experience. I don't think he's dog shit like some people on the internet do. I do think it's a little bit ridiculous to like see him on these like Heisman contender lists and stuff.
He's the leading returning Heisman vote getter in the entire fucking country. That's why he's on the list.
Why, dude? Why was he? I mean, like, bro, he is a 65%.
He was undefeated in SEC play. He finished the season with like, hold on, I'll go look it up right now. He finished the season last year, like the last like 5 games with like, I want to say it was like 17 touchdowns with like 1 interception.
That's fine. He also was a 43.5% passer when he was under pressure last year.
Oh, that's usually what the Heisman voters look at, and not just the touchdown interception number.
Look, he's a 65% passer. Okay,
love it.
Like that's great. I'm just saying.
Stetson didn't even graduate, Graham, and that's the thing that we're not talking enough about.
That might be true. I mean, the odd thing about Milroe too, man, is just, and I think this speaks somewhat truthfully to, I think he is overly reliant on working off script. And I'm very curious how somebody like DeBoer will sort of manage that, because I think DeBoer is a guy who is like, this is my system, bitch. We're running my system. Do my system. Run my play. Oh, well, you know, I forgot about that.
He wears cargo shorts and doesn't cuss. He looks like a polar bear.
But he has a system.
Polar bear.
Jalen DeBoer has a system, and he runs that system. And I think he like it's going to be interesting when you consider the fact that system, yes, there are vertical passing concepts in that system, and they did a lot of really, really awesome, fun stuff to watch with Penix and the 3 NFL receivers that they had at Washington last year. I think Milroe can do a lot of stuff downfield. I think the best part of Milroe's game is his deep ball. I'm just very curious if the building blocks are going to happen between deep ball and him taking off and scrambling. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I think Bama can be really dangerous and win some games in shootouts if he's able to just become a guy who works some of these timing routes a little bit better and is able to get off that first read a little bit quicker. But I just think, I don't know, man. I'm not totally there yet on the idea of like, this guy's one of the 5 best quarterbacks in college football and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, okay. Well, when the season plays out, I'll be here to remind you once again that you're wrong. Here's the thing about like, if you're talking strictly him as a passer, sure, there's flaws, there's like limits to his game, but that's not what's going to happen. Here's the one thing that good coaches will do. Kalen DeBoer does have a system, but I just doubt that Kalen DeBoer is going to go into a situation and say, listen, like this is what I said going into last year. The problem with not playing Jalen Milroe, because a lot of people thought Ty Simpson should start. A lot of Bama fans thought that, especially because he's a white. But Jalen Milroe going into the season, like you had to make a decision, like if he was going to start him out and say, when he steps on the field, he's the best athlete on the field on either side. Like as soon as he steps on the field. So if you don't start him, you have that on the bench. So like, yeah, I mean, the flexibility is a wonderful thing to happen. Like Tommy Rees didn't do that. Like, dude, it wasn't until November that they started running designed run plays for him. And he does have a lot of things that he could work on. And like, I know that a lot of the sacks, you told me stats that I don't understand that a lot of the responsibility for some of the sacks like fall on him. But just think about this.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But at the start of a play, at the physical start of a play, Graham, the first thing that has to happen is the center has to snap the ball 4 yards behind him.
Dude, I am so tired of listening to this narrative of.
Oh my! It's not a narrative. It's a real thing. It's half the snaps.
It's because Jalen Milroe couldn't work off cadence properly, man.
It's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
Sure.
You guys,
the first touchdown of the year
was unbelievable was seeing Nick Saban go on the Pat McAfee show the Tuesday after the Rose Bowl and throw his center fully under the bus like that before he had even retired, mind you.
Seth McLaughlin, his dad called him to Feinbaum last year at one point during the season. Keep in mind, the very first touchdown of the whole season, was because of a snap that went through his legs against Middle Tennessee State, and then he outran everybody. The last play of the season was also a bad snap. 32 of the 65 snaps in that game were off target. Like, whatever you want to say about Milroe and a cadence, snap the fucking ball and hit him in the chest. It's like playing catch. It cannot be difficult. Every other center in the country was able to do it except for Seth McLaughlin. And then his dad went on Feinbaum and said
every other quarterback in the country was able to work off of
the he said that they asked his dad what the problem was, and he said the sound of Bryce Young's clap versus Jalen's clap is just so different, and he's just having a hard time figuring out the noise.
That is stupid, but
clap sounds. So maybe that's why I have a hard time trusting that it wasn't the center's fault.
I have a hard time trusting a quarterback is a Heisman candidate when he can't work off a silent count. How about that?
But he is a Heisman quarterback. He is a Heisman candidate quarterback. He was last year. We need to move on, or we're going to actually fight.
All right. Jalen Milroe will not be in New York this year. That is my prediction.
He was in New York last year.
Okay. Exactly. Thank you.
Anyway,
pick your line, dude. What's the best? What line are you taking Alabama in of the ones that you see on your screen?
I'll tell you what. I'll take LSU. They're a 1-point underdog at LSU. I think it's gonna be a tough game. Obviously, Death Valley is one of the toughest places to play in the country. But here's a fun fact for you, and it's something that our buddy Josh Dogstats can recite just as effortlessly as me because he's heard me say it 1,000 times. Alabama plays LSU every single year, and they have to go to Death Valley every other year. Alabama has a total of 6 losses in Death Valley since 1957. 6 total. So I feel like they will be okay in that one. Just something always seems to happen. There's not a lot of great lines I feel like that you're looking at. It's like of the ones listed, that's the one I feel most comfortable with.
And you said the Georgia or Tennessee is the one you're least comfortable with. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to Georgia here. So early lines that are out from a UGA standpoint, you got Georgia -5 at Alabama, which we've talked about. Georgia -21 at home against Auburn. Georgia's a 2-point favorite on the road at Texas, a 19-point favorite versus Florida in Jacksonville, a touchdown favorite at Ole Miss, and then -15 at home against Tennessee, which is kind of interesting considering the fact that the Bama-Tennessee game is, very tight. I know that it's home versus away, but still says a lot about, I think, how people feel about Heupel offense versus Kirby Smart's defense. Yeah. So I look at this personally, and the one that I, if you put a gun to my head right now and said, you have to bet on one of these lines, I'm taking Georgia -2 on the road at Texas.
Yeah,
that's the spot for me. I think Texas, similar to Alabama, lost a lot in the secondary, and the secondary wasn't that good to begin with.
Yeah,
I just don't trust it. The other thing that I have for you is a really fun stat that I found the other night. So Graham Mertz last year on throws of 20+ yards, 16 of 39, 41% completion, 12.7 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Quinn Ewers last year on throws of 20+ yards, 16 of 47, 34% completion, 12.7 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. I think that Quinn Ewers is a good quarterback. I don't think that he's a great quarterback. I think that he has the 5-star fairy dust on him from back when he was a recruit, and that just gives dudes such a benefit of the doubt over and over and over. And I just don't think that
what's his moment?
I don't think that Bama, really, right?
Yeah, I mean, outside of that, it's like I can't think of another like memorable performance. I think he only had one 300-yard game in his first year in 2022.
Right. Before the Alabama game last year, he had never completed a touchdown pass in his career that traveled more than 20 yards in the air.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And I also think, though, like, he only completed 16 passes last year that traveled 20+ yards in the air, and he had A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy on his team.
And JT Sanders and Whittington, like, dude.
Yeah, he had some dudes for sure. And I just don't think that, like, Isaiah Bond, good player, as you know. The Golden kid they brought in from Houston, also a good player. Like, they have good receivers. I get the Texas recruits really good receivers. I still don't think that receiving core is going to be as good as the one that they just lost. And You're asking him to take a really big leap in his production, essentially like 30-something starts into his career. It's happened before, but normally you see guys kind of take that leap as like a second-year starter. And he did take a step forward last year in his second year as a starter. But the thing that would scare me if I was the rest of the SEC is the possibility that Ewers just kind of flounders around a little bit and they throw Arch Manning out there and his ceiling is just higher and he just kind of goes off and starts making throws like you saw him make in the spring game where he's just rifling shit downfield with his big arm. I don't know if that'll happen or not. I doubt it will. I'd be pretty surprised if a returning college football playoff quarterback gets benched, but it did happen to Kelly Bryant at Clemson. Like it has happened before. That's the one for me. I think. What do you think? Is there anything on this list that you would look at?
I like that because I do think that Georgia's the best team in the country, and I think like I have so many questions about Texas because it's like I think they're going to be good. The schedule, it's like itself will make sure that happens. It's ridiculous. But dude, like this is a team that for the last decade plus, we have all collectively made the joke like Texas is not back. They think they're back every year. They're not back. Like they've had double the amount of losing seasons and they've had 10-win seasons over the last 14 years. They've had 3 or more conference losses in a season in 8 of their last 10 seasons. They're 9-31 against ranked opponents in the last 10 years. Like last year was great, man. It was great. But last year was last year. And you also lost like 2 guys that no one's talking about for whatever reason is like the guy who won the Lombardi Award and then another first rounder at defensive tackle, like right in the trenches. You're going into a new league.
Oh, and by the way, even with those 2 big defensive tackles, you got absolutely manhandled by Washington's offensive line in the college football playoff. And look, I'm not like one of those dudes that's like, oh, Washington's soft. They were in the Pac-12 or whatever. I picked them to go to the playoff before the season last year because of the returning production that they had across the board. Like they had dudes, things were set up for them, and credit to them and their staff for cashing that in. But at the same time, the offensive lines that you were going to face week in, week out in the SEC compared to what you saw in the Big 12 is going to be really different. And I know I'm with you. Like this schedule is pretty assy, but I do think week 2 against Michigan, when Texas goes up there on the road to Ann Arbor, we are going to find out pretty quickly what they are on the line of scrimmage. I don't know if they'll be good or bad or whatever, but I do think that we'll know something. And Oklahoma,
the thing with Texas, I feel like is like, again, that has been the narrative and that's played out, like accurately for like the last very long time. And so to say that all of a sudden that's just going to change overnight, that just feels kind of crazy that we would think that. The other thing is too, is that going into this year, I think that you look at the schedule, it's like there are only 2 possible losses of Georgia and Oklahoma. Somebody's going to jump up and get them. Kentucky is going to be, I feel like, a dogfight for them. Florida could be, but like Kentucky, especially with the way they're built in the front 7 and how many veterans they have coming back. Back to the Georgia thing. If I had to pick one of the most confident, it would probably be the Ole Miss game on the road because they're a 7-point favorite there. So it's a manageable line. And we saw what they did at Ole Miss last year. Like, granted, it was at home. But like looking at what Georgia has done against ranked opponents and in big spots, right? Like the only team that Georgia has struggled with in wins over the last 2 years are Ohio State and Mizzou. And
correct.
And you look at like the different level that they're on over since 2021 versus top 25 teams. Georgia is 13-5 against top 25 teams against the spread, right? 13-5 against the spread. Only 4 of those 13 wins were they favored by single digits. 9 of the 13 were a double-digit favorite, and the average spread for them over that time was 13.3, right? So, like, they're favored by 2 touchdowns in almost every game against ranked opponents. If that's not impressive enough, the average margin of victory over the spread, not like, like they scored more points than the other team, like the amount of points they scored over the spread to cover it, 19.2 points per game over the spread in the last 3 seasons against top 25 teams. If that's not like just pure dominance, I don't know what is. It just everywhere you look at the 2022 season, like the 4 wins, they were over by 20 plus points. Last year was over by 20 plus points. They have been dominant when like the lights shine brightest. So betting against them, if you're going to bet against Georgia, you better do it when they're like a fucking 34.5 point favorite against like Vandy, because
Kent State or some shit like that.
Yeah. I mean, the only other one
of these games they're going to use as practice, really.
Right.
That's the time to do it.
The Florida line is high at 19, but like
I agree.
You just cannot really imagine the level of hatred and pettiness that Kirby has for anyone as much as he does for Florida. And you look at some of like the last since 2017 in that game, Georgia is 6-1, right? The only loss was like in 2020, I believe.
Correct.
Right. They're 5-2 against
the COVID year.
Right. They're 5-2.
Well, I'm sorry. Kirby lost to Florida in his first year.
Right. So I'm saying since 2017.
Okay.
So since 2017, they're 6-1 against Florida. They're 5-2 against the spread against Florida. The only ones they didn't cover was the 2020 loss, and then the 2022 game when they were a 23.5 point favorite and only won by 22. Outside of that, they were over. They covered the like the spread. They were over that by over 11.3 points per game. Like the margins of victory they've had over that line: 35, 19. 7, 16, 27, 22, and 23.
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, Kirby everyone's talked for years about how Spurrier hated Georgia because they cost him an SEC championship his senior year as a player and all of that stuff. When Georgia played Florida at home in Sanford Stadium in 1995, Kirby Smart was a freshman on that team, and Spurrier, ran basically a double reverse pass with like 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter to set up a final touchdown and become the first team to hang 50 on Georgia. The backup safety that was in the game when that happened was Kirby Smart. And so I think that's been kind of this underrated thing that not enough people have realized, is that Spurrier's hatred for Georgia might have sort of given birth to the reverse Spurrier on the Georgia side of the rivalry. And so far that's been the case, but I'm with you. I actually am higher on Florida than a lot of people are. I think Graham Mertz is better than he gets credit for. I really like the Lagway kid. I saw him at Elite 11 last year, and he surpassed all of my expectations. Like, he's not just a runner. He's not just a thrower. He is dual threat to a T. Yeah. That kid's going to be really special. Hopefully they can hang on to him for their sake. But I'm with you on the fact that if I was going to take another line from this Georgia, these early lines, I'm taking Georgia at Ole Miss. I like 7 points at Ole Miss. Look, I know that Ole Miss has brought in all this stuff out of the transfer portal, but I don't know if you can just recruit like the 10th to 14th best recruiting class in the SEC every year for 3-4 years in a row, sprinkle in some guys that were former 5 stars or that had one good season somewhere else, and just kind of make up for it. Like, the depth for Ole Miss is going to be very questionable in my opinion. And I think their first 22 will be really, really good. But by the time you get to November in an SEC schedule, guys are beat up, and I don't know if they'll be able to hang over the long run. I also am going to go ahead and say right now, I don't want to hear anything about Ole Miss ever again being a contender or a possible conference championship winner if they do not go to the playoff this year.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it. You guys haven't won an SEC title since segregation. You guys haven't ever won.
I would say Kennedy.
Well, I mean, it's true, man. I mean, like, they have not won anything. They haven't won a division title. They never went to an SEC championship game. Mississippi State went to an SEC championship game with Jackie Sherrill as the head coach, man.
Yeah.
They lost to Peyton Manning in Tennessee there. Yeah. But like, Ole Miss, Arkansas went to an SEC championship game. Like, everybody in the SEC West. Yeah. Like, everybody in the SEC West in a certain era kind of took turns winning that division, except for Ole Miss. And I like Lane. I think Lane has Ole Miss functioning at somewhere near like peak capacity
for them.
For Ole Miss, exactly. And if they don't, I'm really tired of getting on Twitter like every other day and seeing, some take about how, Ole Miss is going to win the SEC, or like, this might be the year. What does Ole Miss have to do to win the SEC?
It's just Lane.
They're not winning the SEC, man.
Shitty SDS articles, and it makes me want to die.
Well,
for a number of
reasons. Way you're kind of responsible for that, for being honest.
Very fair.
All right, so real quick before we wrap up here, I'm just going to show you this this set of lines.
It's about Milroe. I would get off the fucking show right now.
No, we're not talking about Milroe anymore, dude. Jalen Milroe's ass. We don't have to talk about it. I'm kidding. He's not ass. I think Jalen Milroe is a good quarterback. I think like there's this syndrome that happens in college football a lot where guys are either the best quarterback ever or this dude sucks and is mid, like you said earlier. And the truth is almost always somewhere in between.
The truth is whatever I say it is.
Jalen Milroe is, he's in like Stetson bubble now.
No, he already graduated.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
Tell me. Did he? How old is Jalen Milroe?
28, I believe.
Shut up.
No, I don't fucking know. I think he's like a
is he a junior or a senior? Oh, all right. I thought he was younger than that. Looking at this list, can you see this list in front of you?
Mm-hmm. I've got it pulled up on my computer.
Great. All right. Is there any other SEC line that you're like,
Jumping all over.
that you're jumping all over? Yeah.
So I'll tell you one that's interesting because when it opened, it was A&M was a 3-point favorite. LSU, every game that was listed on this thing for LSU, they were favored in, except for the game against A&M, and they were a 3-point underdog. Now it's a pick 'em. So I do think that one is pretty interesting. Let me scroll through this real quick.
I would jump all over A&M. A&M's a pick 'em at Auburn right now. And
oh, really?
Yeah, that would be one that I think I would like to play. I actually think A&M is going to be shockingly competent this year.
Really?
I'm not saying they're like a playoff team or whatever, but I'd be pretty surprised if they don't win 8 games at least.
Well, you look at what Elko did in year one at Duke. I mean, like they had 10 total wins in 3 seasons combined before he got there. Year one, he gets 9 wins. Dude, year 2, he gets 8 wins, and his quarterback was out for half the year.
Yeah,
I'm with you on that too with A&M. Like, there's like a very weird, quiet confidence going on right now, and it says a lot to me. They're also like it's like a 1-pointer pick 'em against Notre Dame. But the other one, they are a 10-point home favorite against Arkansas. And I think that Arkansas is going to have some struggles this year. So that's another one that I would probably look at.
Yeah, that could be the pretty much any week is going to be like anxiety bowl for Sam Pittman's job status.
Yeah.
Bobby Petrino is just going to be sitting back there. Like, oh, yeah.
Dude, if they hire him back, that's incredible.
I would, man, this country is a pretty great place. You got to be honest. Everything can come full circle. But I also truthfully would, within this same theme, I would have interest in A&M +5 at home against Texas. I don't think A&M's better than Texas on paper, but I think by that point in the season, I do think good staffs get better and figure out what their teams do throughout the year, and that they will do that. And man, that whole fan base universe, Texas A&M program has been waiting and waiting and waiting for that game ever since Thanksgiving night when Justin Tucker ended them, put them out sad. So,
dude, what about it's a non-con game? This is the one I feel like it's the lock of the year. Is Texas a 5-point favorite at Michigan? That went up from 3 to 5, but yeah.
Oh, you like Texas at Michigan, huh? That's interesting.
Yeah, I think Michigan's going to have a massive drop off.
I feel you. Yeah, I do think they're going to have a big drop off, but if Texas is as suspect on the line of scrimmage as I think they could be, then Michigan's defensive line is really good. I think their offensive line is still going to be pretty good. I could see them turning that game into like a slog of sorts and just sort of dragging Texas down into the mud. But you're right. It's less than a touchdown in that scenario is still pretty good. It's interesting you brought those LSU lines just because for all the shit that I hear everyone talking about Florida, they're a 6-point dog to LSU, who is being painted as a playoff contender by some. That's a little bit of a red flag in my mind. Florida's only a 6-point underdog at home to LSU. LSU -6.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Doesn't that just seem that line stinks, dude?
Early too.
High heaven. Yeah. A lot of these LSU lines stink, to be honest. They're only a 3-point favorite at home against Ole Miss. The pick 'em against Texas A&M. There's something kind of shaky there. And I think the truth of it is probably that Nussmeier, it's going to be pretty much impossible for them to be better on offense than they were last year. Yeah. And man, that group of DBs they had last season. They got off the street. So
bad.
We'll see if that improves. But all right, man, I appreciate you coming on and doing this. It was fun. Would love to do some more kind of, preview, look at content with you as we roll through the summer. But tell everybody where to find your stuff and what you're up to with the podcast and what you got going on.
You can find me at your mom's house. Boom, roasted.
No, it is Vern Funko CFB on Twitter and Instagram. Then working with 104.5 ESPN in Baton Rouge as well. That is the new gig now that I've moved on from SDS. And what was the other one? Oh yeah, the podcast, Fourth and Wrong. Me and Tyler Huck. It's the same podcast. We just have a different name because we are no longer under the SDS umbrella. So yeah, Fourth and Wrong. Check it out we just launched like the YouTube channel, and it's on every single podcast streaming platform, all that good stuff. Please subscribe. Subscribe today, and so we can get the numbers up, right? And then do yourself a favor, and when I inevitably make you mad, I will give you permission to go unsubscribe later. But if you just subscribe now and get these numbers up, that's a win for both of us.
Yeah. So final line of the show, over under 550 Georgia fans that you block if UGA beats Alabama in Tuscaloosa.
UGA will beat Alabama. I will be fine. I need to make a ranking of like the worst ones. Like Steve and I are great. Bobby and I are working things out. There's a bunch of them, but there's also like a couple of those guys that are just like, just shut the fuck up about me in your group chat. like, sorry, whatever factual thing I said in a snarky way hurt your feelings. Like, I say way more positive things about Georgia than
that is true. That is very true. I can attest to that. Yeah, man. You guys are this whole vibe right now is like kind of this like,
what vibe?
I had a real just like the general like vibe that you've got right now, kind of like in this post Saban moment of just sort of like, yeah, well, look, I had one great relationship and we were married happily for 17 years, and that's more than most people get. So I don't really care if this new partner of mine like doesn't really make my favorite cake for my birthday, because
listen, I had a horrible heartbreak. I tell you what, I'm going to find the first person I can and move in with them. That's what I feel like is happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what Alabama did when they hired the Washington coach that literally not recruited a single starter on his team out of high school. But that's all right. All right, love you, buddy. Have a good one. Thanks again for coming on, and we'll talk soon. All right, that is the show for tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you're still here an hour and 13 minutes in, then God bless you. Thank you. Come check me out at the Dog Central Forum on TPL Georgia. We didn't even get into like everything that's going on in the UGA recruiting world tonight, but there's a lot going on in the UGA recruiting world right now, and a lot to be excited about if you're a Georgia fan. So come on through, come check it out, and hopefully we'll see you guys over there. Until later, y'all be well.